Welcome, friends and sisters and brothers here. Let's celebrate the beginning of fall. Yeah, we had the first day of fall this week. The weather's nice, and which is good because, we were helping out some folks yesterday. Hauled about 12,000 pounds of hay yesterday and Friday night with the help of my wife and Amish neighbor who loaned me a tractor to load the hay on my trailer. Got the big round bales, about 800 pounds apiece. And of course on the other end, we didn't have a tractor to unload with, but we had some strapping young men who volunteered to help out. Went smooth as can be expected, but long driving, and it was a good day helping out the widow woman, so taking care of her horses. And that's what God calls us to do, to help out the widows and the orphans there and others in need. So that's hospitality. That's doing right. And so today, to start our day, we're gonna think about a couple of things here. First and foremost, we're going to turn to our Hebrew Bibles here to Psalm 78, 1 through 4. Psalm 78. 1 through 4. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our ancestors have told us. We will not hide them from our children. We will tell to the coming generations the glorious deeds of God and God's might and the wonders that God has done. And alrighty then, we're going to skip over today. Our reading from the New Testament today is Romans chapter 12, verses 3 through 8. 3 through 8. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and not all the members have the same function. So we, who are many, are one in one body in Christ, and individually we are members one of another. We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, prophecy in proportion to faith, ministry in ministering, the teachers in teaching, the exhorter in exhortation, the giver in generosity, the leader in diligence, the compassionate in cheerfulness. Oh, we're going to keep going on down to 13. Sorry about that. 3 through 13. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve God. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Hear the words of Paul in the book of Romans. And you know what? Spirit kind of called me to just bring these verses. Somebody out there needs to hear these verses, probably all of us. It's really, it's been a year, the last couple of years has been really challenging in discerning whether or not the Christian leadership in North America, the dominant Christian leadership, is truly following the leadership principles set down by Paul through Christ for the people to do. Now, you've heard me talk previously about, differences and challenges and who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. The last time I talked about this, I talked about, conservative, what is conservative and liberal Christians. It's a political thing that's been invented, so I thought maybe it'd be a good idea, and Spirit kind of compelled me to do this, to look at what are the expectations of leadership. And so I've been talking about that. Here's another one that says, be diligent, compassionate and cheerful, loving what is genuine, or let love be genuine, means being real. Hate what is evil. And I think about what is evil. Willimon, he wrote a book about sin and evil in Christianity. I encourage y'all to look it up and read it. It's kind of outdated. I had a lot of trouble with it in many regards, so it's a good book to read. And because if I had problems with it, well, you probably will too. But it's an eye-opener. It's worth exploring. And the historical information in there is very important to understanding our interpretation and our definition of what is evil from our cultural and religious perspective. And so I encourage you to look that up. Willem. So anyway, check that out. Willimon is the author. He's a former professor or may still be a professor at one of the seminaries. And, so it has been a tough year this year, and it's going to get worse with sorting out who's good, who's bad, who's right, who's wrong in the political arena. And I encourage you to pray for wisdom and discernment about yourself, about your personal agenda, and whether or not the candidates that you are planning on supporting or will decide to support are actually reflecting God's desires or their own. Are you choosing the yes men because they are saying what you want to hear, or are you choosing people because they are actually practicing the principles set down by Christ through Paul and other writers in the New Testament? It's a hard challenge. It's an important challenge. And as we read in Psalms, this is not new. This has been ongoing, and God is in charge. So let God be God, and you do what you need to do. Is sit and pray with chapter 12. I'm not going to go into it a great deal. I've decided that you need to do your research on what chapter 12 really means from God's perspective, and not from human beings' perspective, from God's perspective. So you sort that out. You explore what your agenda is. And today, I'm going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to tell you a story. That's what I'm going to do. So, let me tell you the story of how Rabbit got Otter's coat. Well, the animals, they were together. They were, standing around talking. And this is what the old ones tell us, that the animals got together. They were standing around talking about, well, I guess we're going to have a council meeting. So they recognize that their diversity, their differences, that they recognize some had brown coats, some had long fur, some had short fur, some had lighter, some had darker coats, some had tails, some didn't have tails. And they got to thinking about all that, and they were trying to decide who had the best coat of them all. Well, what was interesting is that they decided that none of them had the best, that the one who had the best coat was the one who wasn't there, and that was Otter. And Otter, he lived way up by himself, and they rarely ever saw him come down. But when there was a council meeting, he'd show up. Somehow, they didn't know how, but somehow he'd hear about it, and he would show up. So Rabbit, he decided, well, you know, I've got to have the best coat. I'm better than everybody else, so I deserve to have the best coat. So old Rabbit, he was a cunning little one, and he just very discreetly asked a few questions around about where did Otter live? Where did he come from? Oh no, it's not Otter. My bad. Beaver. I almost made a big mistake. Think about it. Beaver is out somewhere. So they decided Beaver had the best coat. Well, anyway, so Rabbit's very discreetly wanting to find out where did Beaver live. Nobody really knew because he was so far away and off by himself, way up in the mountains. And but Rabbit did find out that what trail that Beaver used to get to the council meetings. So Rabbit took off up the trail. It took him 4 days and nights to get up to where Beaver lived. And as he got close, lo and behold, there was Beaver in the trail coming down the hill. And Rabbit said, oh, and Beaver saw Rabbit come and said, what are you doing here? Old Rabbit, being real cunning, you know. He said, well, the council sent me up here to make sure you knew about the meeting. The Beaver was like, oh, okay, well, let's go on down. So they started on down the trail, and everything was going fine. It started getting dark, and they stopped, and they camped that night, and everything was cool. The next morning, they woke up, and they decided to get back on the trail, because they had to go several days. So they're walking on down that trail all day long, and Beaver noticed that Rabbit was picking up bits of bark and sticks, and he was putting them on his back. All day long they did this, and finally Beaver said, why are you picking all this stuff up? Rabbit said, well, in the area that we're at right now, all the trees and forests where we're at, fire rains down from the sky. And we got to have protection. But don't worry about it. I'll keep you safe. And so they got and they stopped, and Rabbit picked out a good spot to have camp. Beaver, he was a little worried. He kept looking up around the sky. And it was getting a little dark, so Rabbit got the fire going, and they had their dinner. And Rabbit said, now, you know, don't worry about it. I will stay up, and I will watch. And I'll let you know if there's a fire, because, what Rabbit had decided to do was to clear a path, clear a trail down to the creek. And of course Beaver had asked him, well, what's that trail for? He said, well, if the fire rains down from the sky, we're going to need a quick and easy way to get to the stream, because ducking under the water is the only way we'll be safe. Beaver said, that's a great idea. All right. And so Rabbit, he got settled down, and Beaver took off, and Rabbit said, you know, take off your coat and hang it up on a branch so you don't have to worry about it. Beaver's like, okay. Took his coat off, hung it up on the branch, and he curled up to go to sleep. And Rabbit took his coat off and hung it up there. And he curled up and he looked at those coats, and man, he was really admiring Beaver's coat. It glistened in the firelight and had big paddles, and everything was going good. And so now what Rabbit had done that day is also he had found a stick, and he had fashioned it in the shape of a paddle. And he had told Beaver that he needed that paddle to cover his head, to keep the fire from landing on his head. and he wanted to sleep under it. He wouldn't sleep under it without having that paddle hitting him. So later that night, as he was sitting up, he made sure Beaver was asleep. And he hollered, said, "Beaver, Beaver." Beaver didn't move. He was fast asleep. So Rabbit, he waited a little while longer. And he said, "Beaver, Beaver." Beaver didn't move. So he waited a little while longer, and he took that paddle that he had made, that little paddle, and he went over to the fire, which had burned down to nothing but coals, red hot coals. And he picked that shovel, that little paddle of his, and he picked up as many coals as he could, and he yelled, "Fire!" real loud, and threw those coals up in the air right at Beaver, and they were coming down around Beaver, and he yelled, "Fire!" again, and Beaver jumped right up, and he ran down that trail, and he dove into the water. And Rabbit, he went over to the tree, and he took Beaver's coat, and he left his own there, and he put it on himself, so that he, being Rabbit, now wore Beaver's fur. And he took off down the trail towards the council meeting. When he got to the council, everybody thought it was Beaver that was coming. They saw him coming from a way off. Old Rabbit, he had kept that paw in front of his face so nobody would recognize him. And he went over and he bowed his head, kept that paw up there, and he sat down in the best seat in the council. And you know, the animals looked at him and they were like, "Well, why is he bowing his head? Why does he have his paw over his face?" They thought it was really unusual, but since it was Beaver's coat and it looked like Beaver, it was okay. But Bear's got a really good sense of smell, and he's really suspicious. So Bear came around the circle there, walked up to where the Rabbit had his head down and his hand over his face, and he picked his face up and he moved the hand away, and they saw suddenly that it was Rabbit. Rabbit jumped right up because he knew he'd been found out. He jumped right up and he took off. And old Bear tried to swipe him to get that coat back, but he missed. The Rabbit ran off into the woods, all found out. Yeah, and that's the story of how Rabbit got Beaver's coat. Of course, now we don't know whether or not Beaver ever got his coat back. We do know that somehow Rabbit got his coat back. But you know what? That's another story. All right. Blessings on each and every one of you. Do right by God, your family, community, and all the people. Be of good service. And give of yourself that others may live, even as those who have come before us have given of themselves that we may live. Walk in beauty. Whatever.